Hey everyone, welcome back for another deep dive with us. So today we're going to be looking at a daily devotional entry, and this one is from prayray.com. It's all about the power of praise. You know, I think we can all relate to the idea of praise. Like when something good happens, you're like, oh yeah, thank you so much. But this devotional kind of challenges us to think about praise a little more deeply.
That's right. It's not just like a surface level thing.
Right.
It's not just a quick thank you when something good happens.
Right.
This devotional is really pushing us to see praise as something that can really shape our lives.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a pretty powerful concept when you think about it.
Yeah. So what is it about this devotional that makes it different? Like what makes it stand out to you?
Well, one of the things that really struck me was how it emphasizes praise as a choice,
Okay.
like a conscious, deliberate act of the will.
So it's not just like a feeling.
Exactly. It's not just an emotional response when something good happens.
Oh, I see.
It's more about an active decision. To cultivate an attitude of praise.
So it's like you're choosing to praise,
Well,
regardless of what you're going through.
yeah, exactly. It's about choosing to acknowledge and honor God, even when things are tough.
That's powerful. That reminds me of a verse, Psalm 34.1. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. This devotional really seems to echo that sentiment.
Absolutely. I think that verse is a key part of what the devotional is trying to convey by quoting that verse, It highlights praise as an active declaration of faith.
Okay, so it's like saying, even though things might be tough, I still trust in God. I still trust in God's goodness.
Exactly. It's about trusting in God's sovereignty regardless of our circumstances.
So it's not just about, saying thank you when things are good, but it's also about affirming our trust in God when we're facing difficulties.
You got it.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So it's about more than just expressing gratitude. It's about maintaining that connection with God.
That's exactly right. And that's where the real power of praise comes in.
Okay, tell me more.
Well, the devotional suggests that choosing to praise God, even when we don't feel like it, can actually shift our perspective.
Wow. So you're saying that praise isn't just about acknowledging God's goodness, but it can actually change how we view our problems.
That's the idea. Instead of getting bogged down by anxieties and fears, focusing on God's greatness can help us zoom out and see the bigger picture.
So instead of focusing on, oh, I'm so stressed about this situation at work, you might choose to praise God for his strength and guidance.
That's a perfect example. It's not about denying that the stressful situation exists, but it's about choosing to approach it with a different mindset.
A mindset rooted in faith.
Exactly.
So it's not about ignoring our problems
Yeah.
or pretending like everything's perfect, but it's about approaching them with a sense of peace and confidence, knowing that God is with us.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, cool.
And, this devotional emphasizes that. Cultivating this attitude of praise is something we should be striving for continually.
Okay, so this is where I get a bit stuck, to be honest. When I hear this idea of continual praise, like Psalm 34.1 suggests, it almost seems a bit daunting. Does that mean I should be like walking around in a constant state of ecstatic joy, praising God every second of the day?
Yeah.
Like, how is that even possible?
Especially when life throws curveballs our way.
Yeah, I can see why you'd say that. It's a common misconception.
Yeah.
So devotional isn't saying that we need to force ourselves into some kind of fake or inauthentic expression of praise.
Right.
It's not about denying our human emotions.
Right.
Or pretending like everything is always perfect.
So then what does it mean to cultivate an always-on attitude of praise? How do we balance that with the reality of, our human experience, with all the ups and downs, the joys and sorrows? Like, how do we make that work?
I think it's about recognizing that even in the midst of difficulties, there's always something to be grateful for.
Okay.
It's about making that intentional shift.
Yeah.
From the negative to the positive,
Right.
from what's lacking to what we've been blessed with. So instead of dwelling on, what's going wrong, we might choose to praise God for the simple things, a roof over our heads, a loving family, a beautiful sunset.
Exactly. It's about cultivating a heart of gratitude, recognizing God's presence and provision in our lives, even when things are tough.
Okay, so it's less about
Yeah.
this constant outpouring of emotion,
Right.
and more about just an ongoing awareness of God's presence and goodness.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it.
Okay, but, let's be real for a second. There are times when life just hits you so hard that it's tough to see any good at all. Times of grief or loss,
Right.
or just deep disappointment.
Right.
It can feel like you're in this dark tunnel.
Yeah.
and there's no end in sight.
Absolutely.
So how does this idea of continual praise apply then?
Well, the devotional doesn't suggest that we should deny or suppress those genuine emotions. It's
Yeah.
not about, you know, slapping on a fake smile and pretending like everything's fine when it's not.
Right. So how do we reconcile this idea of continual praise with the reality of like pain and suffering? Wouldn't it almost feel inauthentic or even disrespectful to praise God when you're in the depths of despair?
I think in those moments, praise might take a different form.
Okay.
It might not be about, you know, joyful singing or exuberant expressions of gratitude. It might be more like a quiet whisper of trust,
Huh.
just a simple acknowledgement of God's presence in the midst of the darkness.
So even when we can't like muster up the energy for joyful praise,
Mhm.
we can still choose to acknowledge God's presence, to trust that he's with us even in those difficult times.
Absolutely. Even in our darkest moments, we can still choose to say, God, I don't understand this and it hurts, but I still trust you. I still believe you're good and you're working all things together for my good.
That's powerful. It's a good reminder that praise doesn't have to be loud or boisterous to be genuine.
Right.
It could be that quiet act of surrender, an offering of our broken hearts to the one who heals.
Yeah, and sometimes that quiet act of surrender, that whisper of trust, it's the most profound form of praise we can offer.
That makes a lot of sense. This reminds me of something the devotional touched on, the idea of making praise a deliberate practice, like incorporating specific actions into our routines
Yeah.
to help us foster that mindset of continual praise.
Right?
What are some of the practices it suggests?
Well, it mentions a few. Some are more traditional, some are a bit more contemporary. Prayer, of course, is always a powerful way to connect with God and express our gratitude and praise.
Yeah, I think that's a given. Most people who are engaging in daily devotionals probably already have a prayer routine. What else does it suggest?
It encourages us to find creative ways to express our praise.
Okay, how so?
It could be through journaling,
Okay,
writing down things we're grateful for,
right.
or even composing a song of praise.
That's a great idea. For those of us who are musically inclined, what about those of us who are tone deaf?
Well, the devotional also encourages us to be more mindful of God's presence throughout the day. It could be taking a moment to appreciate the beauty of nature, seeing it as a reflection of God's creativity, or it could be expressing gratitude for a kind act from a stranger, recognizing God's love shining through them.
So it's about training ourselves to see God's hand in the everyday, to find those little sparks of joy and grace that remind us of his presence.
Exactly.
And the more we do that, the more natural it becomes.
Yeah, it's like developing a spiritual muscle.
I like that analogy. So it's not about forcing ourselves to feel a certain way, but it's about intentionally shifting our focus, choosing to see the good, choosing to acknowledge God's presence even in the mundane.
That's it.
Okay.
And as we do that, we start to experience a shift, not only in our perspective, but also in our hearts.
So we're not just changing our outward behavior,
Yeah.
but we're actually transforming our inner world.
That's the heart of it. The devotional really emphasizes that true praise goes beyond words.
Okay.
It's about aligning our thoughts, emotions, and actions with a posture of worship.
That makes me think of something you mentioned earlier, praise as a declaration of faith.
Yeah.
It's not just about saying the right words. It's about living out our belief in God's goodness and sovereignty.
Right.
It's about choosing to trust God's plan, even when we don't fully understand it. Choosing to see his hand at work, even when we don't see the whole picture.
Exactly.
So it all comes back to this core message of the devotional, that praise is a powerful choice,
Yeah.
a choice that can really shape our lives in profound ways.
And that choice to praise God, regardless of our circumstances, that's where the real power of praise lies. It's not a magic formula for an easy life or anything, but it is a powerful tool for navigating life's challenges
Yeah.
with grace and resilience.
Yeah, it's not about denying the reality of our struggles, but it's about choosing to approach them from a place of faith and trust.
That's it.
So we've talked about praise as a choice, a declaration of faith, a tool for shifting our perspective, and a continual practice. What stands out to you as like the most significant takeaway from all of this?
For me, it's the emphasis on the transformative power of praise. It's not just about feeling good or expressing gratitude. It's about aligning our hearts and minds with God's truth.
It's about choosing to see the world through the lens of faith, to trust in God's goodness, even when our circumstances make that difficult.
Absolutely. And that choice to praise God even when we don't feel it, that's where the real magic happens. It's in those moments of choosing faith over fear, choosing praise over despair, that we truly experience the power of God's grace. As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question to ponder.
I'm intrigued. Lay it on us.
Could actively practicing praise, even when you don't feel it, actually impact your outlook and well-being?
That's a good one. It really makes you think, because a lot of times we think about our emotions as something that just happens to us. Like we don't have much control over them. But this devotional is saying that maybe we can actually influence our emotions by choosing to praise God, regardless of how we're feeling at the moment.
Exactly. It's like a form of cognitive reframing by focusing on God's goodness and expressing our gratitude. We can shift our perspective and maybe even experience a more positive outlook.
Even when things are tough.
Yeah, even in the midst of difficult circumstances.
I'm not easy, though.
No, it's not.
It takes effort to choose praise when you're feeling down or discouraged.
It definitely does.
But this devotional seems to suggest that the benefits are worth it.
I think so.
It's a really interesting idea.
Yeah.
That choosing to praise God could actually improve our well-being, like our mental and emotional health.
It's definitely worth exploring.
I think it's a challenge worth taking on. Like, what do we have to lose? Maybe by cultivating an attitude of praise, we might discover this like hidden strength inside ourselves.
And I think it could also deepen our relationship with God.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Experiencing his presence and grace in a more tangible way.
That's a beautiful thought. Well, hey, thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to keep thinking about this idea of praise. Maybe try incorporating it into your daily life, even when you don't feel like it.
Remember, it's not about denying your struggles. It's about approaching them from a place of faith and trust.
It's about seeing God's presence and goodness in every moment, the good and the bad.
You might be surprised by what you discover.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep praising